Hello, Athena. We're happy to have you here, and we would love if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be a board member.
Sure. So thanks, Pam, and thanks, Cure, for inviting me. My name is Athena Belsito Maikish. I live in Mamaroneck with my wife, Christine, and our three young children. And I grew up in the New York City public school system, and schools for me served as a space where I could feel both safe and challenged. And I want to help our students feel the same. I believe strongly in service to my community. Most recently, I'm serving as the co-president of the Central PTA, and I bring a wide set of knowledge and skills to the board. And I want to use these skills to pay it forward and make our local public education even stronger than it already is. I've researched and consulted for leading global organizations such as Accenture, Goldman Sachs, Save the Children, the World Bank, and UNESCO. And for my PhD in education from NYU, I studied what drives positive learning outcomes in schools in the developing world. I've taught and coached middle school students through doctoral students. And then about halfway through my career, I pivoted and I brought my quantitative and leadership skills to the startup world, where I found a love for innovation at Uber. And I really enjoy researching interesting questions. I love collaborating with different stakeholders, and I really enjoy implementing innovative solutions. And there's three things I think that we need to do over the next 10 years in Mamaroneck. We need to focus on robust instruction, especially in the areas of math, science, and technology. I want to make sure we're providing innovative educational opportunities that foster quality outcomes for each and every one of our students. And I want to change the culture of data. I want to use data to make decisions transparently and collaboratively. So that's a few reasons why I want to run and what I think we need to do.
That's great. Thank you. So as you said, I am representing CURE, which stands for the Coalition for Understanding Racism Through Education. And our mission is to expand education around systemic racism and inequities. So along that line, how do you think our district can expand that education? And as a follow-up, how will you as a board member lead to bring together the differing opinions in our district about the importance of equity, culturally conscious, and racially literate education?
Sure. So great question. I think right now, one of the most critical things that we can do is come to each other's table and listen to each other. I believe school leaders and the board need to facilitate some real conversation, some real dialogue amongst our students and families, so that we can begin to understand each other's past and each other's present as well. I also think we have to look critically at the wealth of data we have in the school system to better understand how all of our students are experiencing school. Questions like, how do students of different races progress through our school system academically? What patterns are in the data that we should talk about? In elementary school, we have a wealth of qualitative data in the comments of report cards. And I'm curious, how do students across races experiencing school through the lens of their teachers? I think the other thing we've got to remember, back to your question, is that this is a big change. And I think we have to acknowledge that that's not going to happen overnight. And that we have to train the next generation of leaders, and those are our students. And I think we've got to really bring forth some solid leadership training, even from an early age, to better prepare our students to be the next generation of leaders, whether it be at the HOMICs or the high school, or beyond. And in terms of the second part of your question, I think you were asking about how do we get different voices? Can you repeat the second piece of the question? I want to make sure I'm answering it.
Sure. How will you as a board member lead in order to bring together these differing opinions?
Sure. So I think there's three things that we really need to do to make sure a decision is inclusive. I think we need to research what we're doing and make sure we understand it fully. I think we need to make sure we're collaborating with different stakeholders, and that those, we have all of the stakeholders that we need at the table. And lastly, I think, the other key piece here is once we come to a decision, it needs to be communicated. It means the why we made it needs to be communicated. So just making a decision and stopping there isn't enough. I think we've got to make sure we educate and we explain how we got to that decision, and make sure that's communicated to the different stakeholders and collaborators in the community.
Terrific. So can you speak to what you believe are some of the issues around equity and access here in the Mamaroneck School District, and what you believe are potential solutions to those challenges?
Sure. So to me, educational equity means that each and every child receives what they need to develop to their full academic as well as social potential. And I think this is a tricky question because I think before we can suggest solutions for our district, we need to understand the problems better. The Center for Public Education came out with a report on 8 characteristics of effective boards. And one of them is that boards need to embrace and monitor data, even when the information is negative, and use it to drive continuous improvement. So, I can ask, do all children have access to the same opportunities in school? And are they reaching their academic potential across race, across gender, across income? And I'm not sure the answer to that is yes, but I also don't know that we have a deep enough understanding as a board to create policy that will drive significant changes. Informed policymaking requires using data, and I think communities expect measurable results through data from their tax dollars. So we need to dig into our data, we need to set goals, and then we need to monitor and talk about the results. And this is part of my background. I'm a trained statistician. So for me, this is critical. It's work that I can bring, and a mindset I can bring to the board. But I think in order to drive, changes that are needed to make sure that we really do have equity among our students, we've got to understand the problem at the data level, really communicate and talk about what those issues are and how they're affecting different segments of our population, and then drive policy change off of that data investigation.
And how would you, and what would you do actually as a trustee to ensure decisions made by the board are inclusive to the needs of all students and families?
Sure. So I talked about this a little bit in the question before, but really to me, it's researching, it's collaborating, and it's communicating decisions. And I think, if you have those 3 pillars, you can really establish trust and transparency, and that will work to make sure that that we're inclusive. I think this is a place too where you have to recognize when you make mistakes, and when maybe you weren't able to listen to all the voices last time. How do I listen to them better? And I think a key piece of anyone who runs for the board is needing and wanting to continue to be educated. And so for me, it's about really listening to the voices out there. And when I make a mistake, acknowledging that and making sure that that's fixed for the next time. Because we can all, we all try to be inclusive, but we have to recognize that we're not always, we don't always succeed. So for me, it's, making your best effort, research, collaborate, communicate, and then on the back end, really reflect and see how you did, and make it better for the next time.
And you spoke about listening to the voices. So along that, how will you incorporate voices that are often left out of the decision-making in our community?
Sure. So one of the things, when I started my campaign, I was like, I'm going to make some events and hope that people come out to them. And I thought about it, and I thought to myself, I don't know that I would be comfortable with that. And so what I did is I pivoted a little bit, and I started to go to where other folks were as much as possible. And so, I went to the MAS International Fair, and I walked around and I met people. I introduced myself at the Central Play after it was done. I try to get to the sports field to meet different people. I planned a district-wide chess day, and I met a whole segment of families at that. And I think, what's critical here is that we go into the communities, especially, for example, our Spanish-speaking community may not feel comfortable coming to all of our events. For example, our superintendent coffee that I went to a few weeks ago, I was excited to hear like what people were thinking and saying, and and it was pretty sparsely attended. But if I look at if I look at it, I don't know that if it was in Spanish, if I would feel comfortable going because I don't know the language well enough. And so I think we've got to do more of that, more of those outreach initiatives in the language that people feel comfortable, in the places that people feel comfortable. I also think that we need to better partner with our PTAs and our community organizations, so that these organizations and our PTAs often represent voices, of their constituents, and why not lean on these organizations to help us stay informed and to help us, uplift the voices that we may not be hearing. So we really need to make sure every voice is heard and incorporate it. But I think we cannot wait for it to come to us. We have to go to it to the voice.
It's great. So is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about yourself or your goals that maybe we didn't cover in the questions I asked?
No, I think I appreciate what you guys do. I think ultimately, I just want people to get out and vote. Voting is a critical piece of our democracy. And if people want to get more informed about me, they can go to Athena for School Board, ATHENA, and learn a bit more. But I think learn about all the candidates and just get out and vote on the issues that are most important to you.
That's terrific. Great. And you let people know where they can find out more about you on your website. So that's great. And thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts.
Thanks, Pam. I appreciate the time you guys put into this.
All right. How do I?